Welcome to the Family Bible Journey. If you're interested in seeing how the journaling that we mention in the podcast works, check out our website at familybiblejourney.com or look for us on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for listening. This is episode 432, season 1 of the Family Bible Journey Old Testament podcast. Today we're looking at Ecclesiastes chapter 3. The title of today's podcast is There is a Season. And our key verses for today, the entirety of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, where we read, "For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek, and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to tear, and a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. What gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken away from it. God has done it, so that the people fear before him. That which is already has been. That which is to be already has been. And God seeks what has been driven away. Moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice, even there was wickedness, and in the place of righteousness, even there was wickedness. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. I said in my heart with regard to the children of man, that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beasts is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beasts, for all is vanity. All go to one place, to dust all return. Who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward or the spirit of the beast goes down to the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what will be after him? This is the word of the Lord. And so for those listeners to the podcast who may be older than I am, certainly as we were reading those opening verses of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, you probably had a tune to a good old Birds tune playing in your mind as you were thinking about a time for this and a time for that, a time for every purpose under heaven. And in my simple understanding of this passage, the simple wisdom, the simple beauty is for us as God's people to recognize and embrace the seasons of life and seeking the blessings that are there. Because there is a blessing everywhere God is. And even if we may not be going through the best of times, maybe it feels more like the worst of times. If God is there, there is plenty for us to learn. There is plenty for us to appreciate and even plenty for us to enjoy. And I have seen many people who had lived lives that were lived in abject poverty, happier than most of my friends. I have known women who have buried 3 husbands in their lifetimes, and yet they still had the gift of godly peace and joy and a genuine and true love in their hearts. This doesn't mean that everything that we go through is good or happy or awesome or anything that we would even ask for. But again, as long as God is there with us, he promises to bless us. And he will show us the beauty of every season of life, as difficult as it may be. And the reality is that even though we may not like it as God's children, he often uses the difficult and the really hard stuff to reveal his love to us in ways that we otherwise may not appreciate or ever even begin to understand. Because the wisdom of God is to use the hard stuff to highlight and to showcase the surpassing value of his love and mercy. I do have a couple of notes on this chapter that I want to share with you. I have a couple of those words of wisdom sections. We haven't had a ton of those here recently. So in the Family Bible Journey Journal Bible, we are noting them with all caps. And on verse 11, the words of wisdom, the WOW section, it says, God has put eternity in man's heart. Even though we live in bodies that are getting older and over the course of time dying, and even though everything in this world is passing away, inside we aren't aging at all because we have an eternal soul within these frail mortal bodies. And this is a great opportunity and a great fact that we as Christians can use to share the reality of God's redeeming love with others, because God has created us to live forever. And inherently, every human being at some level is aware of it, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. I have another words of wisdom on verse 15 where it says, God seeks what has been driven away. And I actually have a red Cairo on that verse. That's the X and the P. It looks like an X and a P in English, but that is the first two letters of Christ in Greek. And we use that to mark the Old Testament passages that show us the character or make a direct prophecy that is to be filled by Jesus Christ. I also have highlighted in green verse 11, verse 12, and verse 13. And so I'm going to read each of those verses for you again. The first one, he has made everything beautiful in its time. That is a great reminder for us. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart. It's another part of that very same verse that I have highlighted. Simple little tidbits of wisdom that are good for us to hold on to. Verse 12, it says, I perceive that there is nothing better for them than that they be joyful and to do good as long as they live. And godly people who embrace this attitude are going to do tremendous and untold good in their lives that we can't even begin to measure or understand. And so this verse simply lays that out there and just says it point blank. And then finally, verse 13, a verse that may be appreciated by some of our more hedonistic listeners, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. And on that note, I want to encourage you again, as we've been encouraging all the way through the book of Ecclesiastes, find the beauty where you are. Find the joy in that particular place that you find yourself in this life. Because there is beauty, there is joy, there is goodness, there is laughter everywhere that the Lord is present. And when we as God's people are looking for these things and we're looking out to him for these things, we are much more likely to see them than if we follow the way of the world that teaches us that if we put ourselves first and take care of ourselves first, that is a source, that is the path to happiness. Because it is a bald-faced lie. If you want to know lasting joy, peace, satisfaction, true fulfillment for your soul, look for it from above and learn to live by pouring yourself out for the blessing of others, as Jesus Christ has in every way poured himself out for you and for your salvation. Because when you do, you are going to become more aware and be given even more opportunities to see God at work in your world and in your life and be filled up by the blessings that only he can give. If you appreciate this podcast as a part of your daily routine and would like to become a monthly sponsor so that others are blessed as you are by the podcast, go to FamilyBibleJourney.com to learn more. Sponsorships are tax deductible and cover our operating expenses like hosting and the services that make this podcast work. Our blessing for today. May you see the joy in every season and the beauty of every place the Lord brings you to in this life. Amen.